Welcome to those of you already waiting in the room. I'm Lisa Fraser from QCOS. We're just going to give a moment for people to enter. We've got quite a few people joining today. I'm going to start shortly, but I'll start with an acknowledgement of country. So for anybody that's already online, I'll give you the heads up that that's what I'm about to do. But if you'd like to join in and drop in the chat the country that you're joining from today, that would be fantastic. I might make a start. So as I said, I'll start with an acknowledgement of country. So QCOS would like to acknowledge the historical injustice of colonisation and dispossession of First Nations peoples and its ongoing impact and legacies. We are committed to reconciliation, self-determination and the opportunity for First Nations peoples as integral steps in achieving equality, opportunity and wellbeing for all Queenslanders. I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional elders, past and present, of the country that I'm meeting with you today, the Turrbal and Yagara peoples, and pay my respects to any First Nations colleagues joining us in this place. So, as I said, for those just joining, please jump in and pop in the chat where you're joining from today. So we've got about 16 people, 17 people already joined. We're expecting quite a few more. But we'll start with some introductions of who's in the room. So this is an interactive workshop. I know some people might be a little uncomfortable, but really want you to join in on today's workshop, and I'll be asking questions throughout the workshop and encouraging you to either pop comments in the chat or come off mute actually and talk up. So it's that type of workshop. So just in terms of the purpose of today, the workshop today is about putting your best case forward to improve your chances of success for your funding applications. The content of this workshop will be focused on providing tips to community-based organisations to write great tenders or grant applications, and the context we're using today is the Skilling Queenslanders for Work initiative. So that's what we'll be using all the way through. However, many of the tips that we'll be talking about or techniques we're talking about today are relevant across many grant applications. So before we begin the session or the content of the session, I just want to get through some housekeeping. So just to let you know, you will be receiving a copy of the presentation slides in a post-event email. Also in that email, you'll receive links to any of the resources that we're referring to today. And I'll be referring to a couple of free webinars that are coming that we're offering over the next week. And you'll also get the registration links to those webinars, but I'll also be popping them in the chat throughout today. So just to move to, because a couple of the resources that we'll be discussing today I'll get you to be using in this workshop, I'm going to ask Taya from QCOS to drop those resources, a link to those resources into the chat and get you to download them and save them on your computer, because as I said, later in the session we'll be using them. So Taya's just dropped them both in. Before you click on them, it's best if you go to the three dots on the right-hand side of those documents and click them, hit download, and then save them. Then you'll be able to use them as a fillable Word version of the document. That's how you should be receiving them. Now, I'll get on with things, but if you have any trouble, please make a note in the chat and Taya will assist you to get those documents onto your computer. Taya is in the session under QCOS events. That's her username. So now just moving to some introductions, it would be great. I think we have about 40 odd people registered for today's session. Typically, we have about half of that number turn up, and that's looking about right at the moment. So it would be great if we can, it's only a small group, so if we can introduce ourselves, and I'll make a start. So we'll introduce ourselves. it would be great if you can talk a little bit about where you're from or what organisation you're from, and whether you have any experience in delivering SKU applications. So some people who attend these workshops or are already delivering SKU programs or Skilling Queenslanders for Work programs, and some people are brand new and are interested in putting in a tender. Some people attend just for broader grant writing skill development. So, and that's okay too. So it'd be good if we can hear from people in the chat about who you are, where you're from, and whether you currently deliver SKU. So, and everybody can read. So jump in the chat. I'll introduce myself now, and then happy for you to put your introduction in the chat or come off mute and speak. So, yeah, so just so I mentioned, I'm Lisa Fraser from QCOS. I'm a Sector Development Officer with QCOS, and I'm managing the Skilling Queenslanders for Work tender writing series. I also support QCOS's Quality Collaboration Network, which is a network of about 700 participants across Queensland, focused on all sorts of matters related to quality and compliance in relation to service provision for community-based organisations. I've got a background in direct service provision in the disability sector and have worked as a senior manager with a large service provider in Southeast Queensland, predominantly providing services to adults with intellectual or cognitive disability and complex needs, and engaging in challenging behaviour or behaviours of concern. So I've also worked for the peak body for non-government service providers in the disability sector, which is National Disability Services, for about 9 years. And my role there was undertaking a raft of projects and so on, including supporting the sector to transition from a welfare market to a model of operation to a market model of operation as the NDIS was introduced across Australia. So that's a little bit about me. So is anyone brave enough to put their hand up or come off mute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Grant from Five Bridges. We've been delivering Skilling Queenslander and IWSDG programs since the first iteration.
Wow.
We currently deliver from projects in North Queensland, CQ, North Coast, Metro, Southeast, and have delivered into the Downs across a number of, but mainly training and employment, so not really playing in the apprentice space, those Skilling Queenslander traineeships. Always go on these things. That sometimes the department's eye takes a different glance year to year, priority on priority, and region to region. So it's always good to get these updates.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Have you been able to make it to any of the department's information sessions?
The North Coast one in Moreton.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously there's a number of changes coming. They're not really outside of cutting or combining community work skills with ready for work and that sort of thing. But we know there's a bigger raft of changes coming in terms of deliverables and KPIs and industry and employer inputs. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the next round comes up with. Yeah.
Thank you, Grant. I think you've made a really good point, and we'll talk about that throughout the session today, that there are some initial changes to the SKU program that has been revamped. They're relatively perhaps minor changes compared to some of the changes that may come in the next round in early 2026. I see you've got your hand up, Patricia.
Yes. Sorry, I thought I would just get the ball rolling as well.
Thank you.
So I'm Patricia Vong. I'm from Uniting Care Queensland. I'm the Practice Improvement Advisor for a portfolio of programs, but previously I was heavily involved in the federally funded programs. So I am new to the, the Queensland funded program. So I'm really keen to hear, keen to hear and learn. So,
great. Thanks so much. And I see your hand up, Petra.
Oh, yes, I think can you hear me?
Yes,
I
we
think
can.
I took myself off mute. Fabulous.
Yeah.
My name's Petra. I'm with Gympie Landcare in Gympie, clearly. We have partnered with JobMatch Disability Employment. We're running our first Skilling Queenslanders for Work program. We've just finished one and are running the second one back to back. And Gympie Landcare is going to be putting in for the next round on our own without partnering. So we're very keen to see what's coming up. Also very keen to hear what you think some of the bigger changes would be in 2026 that are coming up, just as a bit of heads up.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully we can talk about some of those things throughout the session. All right. Beck, were you wanting to introduce yourself? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but I see your camera on, so that's great.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Sure, thanks. Yeah, I'm Beck. I'm from Communities of Gladstone Supporting Youth. We are piloting programs in conjunction with some of the high schools here targeted towards disengaged youth. They're at risk of leaving school. So we are piloting a program that's going to give them access to soft industry skills, their white card courses, and a bit of collaboration with our local employers there with the end goal of re-engagement back into education, further training or employment. So this would be our first time around applying, so we're very new to it. So yeah, just hoping to find out how it aligns and how we can further support these kiddos. Thank you so much.
I see a number of people have put comments in the chat. Is there anyone else who would like to come off mute and introduce yourself? I think it helps. It really does help with this type of workshop. Even if you don't have any experience in SKU, that's just as relevant. Liz, thank you.
Hi, Liz Ford from Queensland Fruit and Veggie Growers. We're just looking into at the moment, considering a community work skills project, because we've had a lot of feedback from our local valley growers specifically.
Okay, so you're looking at this for the first time of putting in a grant application?
Yeah, all new to this.
Oh, excellent. Okay. It's really helpful when we do this as a face-to-face workshop, we go around and ensure everybody introduces themselves. I know it's always a little bit more awkward for people online if people aren't used to it, but it's really helpful because it helps people who have got a lot of experience in SKU know who's in the room and that some of their insights can be really valuable to share with others. So, and vice versa, people, we have RTOs joining sometimes. So it's please keep sharing in the chat as we go. It's a really good thing to know who's in the room. Sorry, I just missed someone. Noble?
Hi, it's Noble Type. I'm Life Without Barriers, responsible for the tender and grant session. But also we are part of the LWB group. We got an agency in Queensland called My Horizon and currently helping them to prepare the submission. Yeah. And I understand they've been successful in the submission for a few years already. But looking forward to the workshop.
Thank you. Now, I'll just checking to see if I've missed any hands. There's a couple of people here. Sorry, I can't see someone's name, but showing as President, Rockhampton.
Yes, good afternoon. Sorry, my name's Russell. So like a couple of other people in the room from Rockhampton Boxing and Youth Engagement, it's our first time for applying. We've done a fair amount of extensive work with youth at risk. Particularly with the Real Life Academy grant youth camps that we've had, and also some of the skilling, and we're located not just Rockhampton but some of the rural and remote areas, such as Mount Morgan and Yeppoon, also Mount Morgan. So our first time, so very interesting to see what other people have got to say in the room and to learn and to to pick up any helpful information from that. So looking forward to it.
Great, thank you so much. All right, is there anyone else who desperately wants to introduce themselves? Thank you, Diana. Yeah, keep popping things in the chat and we'll get started. But as I said, your intel is as valuable as what we'll be offering today. So please add to it and or ask the questions as we're going. So we'll get into some of the content now, because some people are new to SKU and because some people attend the tender writing workshop without having first attended an information session delivered by the department. We'll go over just a little bit of basic SKU information. So when I say SKU, just to be really clear to everybody, I'm referring to the Skilling Queenslanders for Work initiative, or the SQW initiative. And because it's a bit of a mouthful, most people who know it shorten it to SKU. So SKU is an ongoing annual investment from the Department of Trade, Employment and Training of $80 million and funds community-based organisations to deliver local training and employment projects. The initiative represents a commitment to increasing workforce participation, driving job growth and strengthening the performance of the Queensland economy by improving skills development and work opportunities for disadvantaged Queenslanders. SKU supports the delivery of tailored local community-based support to a range of target groups, if you like, and some of those of the target groups this year are women re-entering the workforce, First Nations people, youth or young people, mature age job seekers, people with disability, people facing barriers such as mental health, Australian Defence Force veterans and their families, recently incarcerated people or people recently released from prison, people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, people facing domestic and family violence, others who face specific barriers to employment that meet the SKU program eligibility. So I guess it's really important to stress that point, that you might, there's a range of target groups that the department identify, but programs are not limited to those groups of people. People need to meet specific SKU program eligibility, and then there needs to be, of course, you would have expertise in a particular area supporting those individuals, and they could be a relevant group. So Skilling Queenslanders for Work, or SKU, is characterised by those clearly defined target groups and those meeting the specific program eligibility, by voluntary participation of individuals seeking employment, individual pathways for different individuals and cohorts, an integrated mix of assistance, and strong support provided to participants of those programs. So what are funders actually looking for in applications? So whenever you're submitting any funding application, it's really important to first understand the objectives of the funder and what they are actually looking for in applications and programs. So the Department of Trade, Employment and Training, or DTET, I'll refer to them as throughout the session, have stated that they're looking for, as indicated by this quote on the board, they're looking for community-based organisations who approach projects with the intent to provide genuine support and assistance to participants. So if you've submitted a SKU application before and not been successful, for example, in round 1, 2025 or earlier this year, it's not too late to request feedback from the department, the central team, on your application. This seeking feedback from the department is going to assist you with important information about your current application if you plan to put one in. And my understanding from departmental staff is that people have sometimes applied year on year. They may not have been successful the first 2 times, but based on feedback and tweaking their applications, they've been successful, for example, the 3rd time. So don't feel discouraged if you haven't been successful the first time. They strongly encourage you to contact them to to discuss the program that you're potentially going to put in for, but to also seek feedback on former applications. Similarly, if you have been successful for SKU applications in the past, it could be wise for you to seek feedback from the department on why you were successful, which sometimes we don't think to do. But given that SKU is an evolving program, if you like, and needs change in different areas and for different cohorts of people, it could be, for example, that you were successful, so you think you ticked all the right boxes, but it may have been that you were the only provider in that region that put in an application for that particular cohort of people. So it's still worth finding out why you're successful, and they welcome these questions. So now I'll just pop. Actually, I'm just going to pop in the chat. Many of you will have this email address, but it's SKUAPPS, the email to contact. So it's not your local DETET office, although they could give you the email. So it's SKUAPPS@DESBERT, not DETET, so the old name, DESBERT. So, sorry, bear with me while I do this. Queensland.gov.au. So this is the email address that you would be seeking feedback from. Can I just ask, are there any department staff online today? There may not be. If you go to the other point, I think, and this has been stressed in all of the face-to-face workshops that we've done, and we've had DETET staff present in those workshops, because they've been delivering information sessions directly before us. One of the changes to the program this year is that it would need to be, so there's a question in the chat, does it need to be the person who submitted the application? It wouldn't need to be the person, it would need to be an authorised person within the organisation that seeks that feedback. So, and when I say an authorised person, it couldn't be it might not be, for example, a frontline or front-facing support worker who asks for feedback. It would need to be a person with relevant authority in the organisation to seek that feedback. Sorry, back to my point. DETET staff, one of the changes to the program this year in terms of the assessment of applications is that it will be a central team that are assessing SKU applications this year and ongoing. So that responsibility has been removed from the different regions. And so it's not your local DETET staff that will be assessing applications. They will, however, give some guidance and have some input, but they're not making the decisions. That's a really important change for a couple of reasons. One, you may have relationships with your local DETET staff where they really know your work very well if you're currently a SKU provider. And I guess you may not have had to have articulated as clearly in your SKU application, the program, because you've had that relationship. Now that won't be happening. So there's even a greater emphasis on being very, very clear in your application what the application or what the program actually intends to do. And we'll talk more about that throughout today. But the benefit, I guess, to you is that you can now go to your local DETET staff and discuss with them what you're planning to actually put forward in an application. They are strongly encouraging everybody to actually do that, to talk with them about the program. They can, provide you different intel, different support, talk to you about whether that is still a need or a priority area that they're focused on. And it's actually a question on the application process as well. Have you talked to your, local DETET staff about your idea? So all of the DETET staff that have attended workshops so far have been kind of quite excited about that and really strongly encouraging people to pick up the phone or organise to meet with them to talk about, your current idea. So for SKU applications, you must demonstrate that you as a community-based organisation understand the intent of the SKU programs, including demonstrating some key requirements. So developing the skills of disadvantaged Queenslanders who are unemployed or underemployed in the labour market, and building the skills of people in the target groups or others meeting the program eligibility. Providing assistance to people who need support to enter and stay in the workforce. Training and assessment strategies must support the needs of disadvantaged learners, so they must make accommodations. If you're partnering with an RTO for accredited training, or you're providing unaccredited training, then those strategies need to accommodate different people and different cohorts and demonstrate how you do that. So community-based organisations must have legitimate and established employer engagement strategies in place. So one of the things that the DTET have indicated is that training for training's sake isn't acceptable. So a project must be driven by the community-based organisation's understanding of the target group and their specific barriers to employment, and not be driven by the RTO. So just in relation to in terms of some of the organisations in the room and people in the room who have demonstrated this in the past within your tenders and within your programs, do you want to just pop in the chat, or again come off mute, or put your hand up and come off mute, to sort of talk about how you might demonstrate some of these things? So how might you, for example, demonstrate that you're making accommodations for the learning needs of the target group that you're working with? Or, how might you demonstrate that you have established employer engagement strategies in place? So Petra has mentioned that she gets letters of support from potential employers in the industry. Yep. Some people in the workshops have suggested, depending on the program, of course, they're doing that. Definitely, we'll talk about letters of support from employers a little bit later. They might get up to 40 different letters of support from 40 different employers, depending on the numbers of people that they're targeting in their project or their program. So, and they get those, they organise those well in advance to make sure that you can get them in time to submit with your application. Most RTOs obviously have to incorporate strategies that accommodate for different learning needs. Are there any other strategies that people are currently using to demonstrate that you're supporting disadvantaged learners? And it could be, for example, if you're supporting mothers who are returning, or parents returning to the workforce, women are returning to the workforce, that you're providing your training, accredited or non-accredited, within school-based hours, for example, to enable them to actually attend the training. Are there other strategies people can share? If not, just pop them in the chat as they kind of arise for you. So in terms of developing projects based on who you work with, this is a really important thing to do. This is a quote from a SKU assessor. Think about who you work with on a daily basis and develop projects to support the clients you already support, basically. And I guess that's about ensuring that you have the expertise as the community-based organisation with a particular target group. So you'll need to consider your organisation's purpose, your values, your core business, areas of expertise, experience, existing client groups or community links, and so on. And there can be actually risks for you in relation to applying for funding where the program doesn't align with your own purpose or your core business. And it might be that the application does not effectively address the assessment criteria, and the evaluation is poor, or the application succeeds but then you as an organisation struggle to deliver. So just in terms of methodology, QCOS offer a methodology to prepare. So start to work on your preparation of your tender, and QCOS refers to it as the R2D2 methodology, which is a methodology referring to organising your work. So starting with the development of a reference library. So we recommend the first step in your grants toolkit is to put together a grants reference library. So that's one place where you would keep all the information you might need for funding. This happens and happens regularly if you've ever put in tenders. People come toward the deadline and then they realise their accountant is away and they can't get copies of audited financial statements or know where their insurance details are, or the resumes of key staff, or brief descriptions of your organisation's capability, these kinds of things. So you can prepare a lot of these things, which you may already have in a reference library, but having them all ready so that when the tender application is ready to put in, all of that information is available, and you're keeping it in one place. So then developing a plan. So you could use the grant on a page resource for this, which we'll discuss soon, and is one of the documents that you downloaded earlier from the chat. So then you can begin to kind of write your initial ideas down on this and ensure that you're covering all of the different areas of a tender application. And you can start drafting your responses to the assessment criteria. So the C3PO is about the writing part of the work, which is a big part of the work you're going to do, and ensuring that you're writing clearly, concisely, comprehensively, persuasively, and on point. And we'll talk a little bit about writing later. That probably can't be underscored enough because there are pretty tight word limits to the application. So the style of writing that you need to do for tenders, for tender applications is quite disciplined. We can't stress enough for you to read and reread the DETECT guidelines. I will pop those in the chat if you don't have them already. Do that now. Actually, I'll pop in the chat the DETECT SKU web page, as well as the guidelines for applying. And so if you don't already have them. So the DETECT SKU webpage has lots of different resources available for applicants. It has a whole provider kit available to applicants. So even once you are successful, there's a range of documents that you might find useful there. So if you haven't looked at it, definitely please do. The SKU guide for applying for funding and various fact sheets that are available on the website tell you about the program's purpose. The guidelines clearly articulate the 5 assessment criteria that we'll spend some time today working on, and the expected outcomes and KPIs of the programs. They also dedicate a page there to budget inclusions and exclusions, so it's very clear to people what you can and you can't put in your budget request. As I indicated, if you've got any kind of concerns there, definitely speak to your local DETECT staff who will be able to answer some of those questions. But it's very clear if you download those guidelines and open them, you can flick to a page where it specifically talks about what you can and what you can't apply for in terms of budget. So QCOS, one of the documents that was dropped in earlier is called a grant on a page. So it's a resource, the one that we provided you, it's on our website, but you've got a fillable copy. So you can start actually, I would keep that document open because you can start writing into it throughout today's session. And so it provides basically some prompters on how to plan and map out your project. So It's designed to help you describe, to analyse and design your project model so that when it comes to writing your application or answering the assessment criteria, you've got a much clearer idea of what you're going to include in that area. So it helps you think about the how and if your project fits with your strategic plan and your organisation's mission. I know as NGOs, it's often tempting when we see funding opportunities to just apply for it and hope for the best. But it's important for you to find grants that really match your project and not the other way around. And so by doing this work up front and really thinking about how all of these elements are going to fit together, you won't waste time applying for a grant that doesn't match your project or that your project doesn't actually qualify for. So just in terms of having a bit of a look at the grant on the page and the various categories under it, it talks about, the project team and noting the roles and responsibilities of that project team, the participants and who your target cohort are and how you will actually reach your target cohort. For some people, they may be providing direct services, to those to the target group. Or it could be that they have a very clear referral pathway of people to them. For some organisations, they have been delivering SKU for a long time, so they have established referral pathways, people, sending referrals to them. Again, how for the people in the room though, could you share with others how you access clients or how participants find out about your programs? Happy for people to pop it in the chat or again, pop your hand up and come off mute. I know we had a neighbourhood centre in the room and they were saying they've been delivering SKU for a long time and most of their referrals now come to them by word of mouth. So it's previous participants talking to other people that then refer. And they've had whole generations, multi-generations of families actually come through the SKU program. Petra.
Yeah, Gympie has so we do the work skills. We do a traineeship for conservation ecosystem management. And Gympie has a really good umbrella organisation for all of our community support agencies. And we basically go out through those guys and it goes to all the community support, the disability support, mental health support, youth support, Indigenous support. And it goes out through those and we get the majority of our referrals through that. And then we also use Facebook. It's amazing how well Facebook goes as parents, for example, see something and prod their child to go, come on, you can do this.
Yep. And that's definitely consistent with what we've heard other people saying to social media. Facebook in particular works well. I see Grant's popped in the chat, social media and WOM, word of mouth, with the restriction lifted for WFA providers.
Workforce Australia participants.
Oh, okay, And also the link in with local jobs providers, Thank you. Anyone else? It's important, I guess some other people we've had people in the room who haven't delivered SKU before, and are not necessarily engaged in the community services sector. So some people have suggested them presenting at interagency meetings, and similar to what you were mentioning, Petra, are very get in with those interagency meetings or umbrella groups that share, or neighbourhood centres, kind of natural places that people might go. Was it Russell?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm probably a bit along the lines of everybody else. I mean, we've got a very strong, particularly in the region or the community we're basing ourselves on. So we've got a strong lateral organisation, strong commitment and engagement with youth and also younger people within that community. And along with help of all the providers out there also referring in, and word of mouth, like everybody else has said, including social media. So we've got a long list to be able to pick from as far as gaining momentum or getting participants into the program. And we've researched that before we decided to apply this time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, so the department really want to see these things, and you've obviously done your homework, but they really want to see that people have got those strong links and strategies of how they're going to engage. Can I just ask if anyone is known to some of the local area coordinator providers? For example, in Southeast Queensland, it's Carers Queensland delivering they're the NDIS partner in the community. Does anyone have anything to do with Carers Queensland in terms of making your services known to them? Russell? Oh, sorry.
I was on mute. Yeah, certainly. Carers Queensland come to quite a few meetings that we're involved with community-wise. And particularly, I've got a background with the NDIS as a former manager and also workplace health and safety manager. So which is very good for us for that. And we do deal with all levels of youth with CALD, First Nations, and also people with disabilities and intellectual disabilities also, as well as physical. So yeah, through the NDIS, and they are participants of that. And I think that's something, and I do know Carers Queensland offer quite an amount of information out there, and some projects in regards to days that you want to know things, or information gathering. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know from having worked with Carers Queensland and in the Partner in the Community program that one of the things that local area coordinators do as part of their work with pretty much everyone coming forward is make referrals to community. And there are a lot of people that come forward, and some of the things they want assistance with is seeking work, and they do face multiple barriers to employment. So so getting out there and knowing what these organisations do, and knowing the organisations, I guess, in the relevant area for you, who are making referrals on a daily basis out there to organisations like yourselves or programs like SKU is really useful. So in terms of resources, so the identification of resources your organisation has and those it will need for the project to go ahead. Sorry, we're jumping back to the grant on a page here. The impact, the purpose of the project, ideas and hoped for key outcomes, both those that are short-term and long-term outcomes. And really importantly, the value add. So what's the value add that your organisation will offer? What do you do really well? And some of that may be around the expertise for the cohort that you've selected, or cohorts you've selected. I think it can't be underscored enough or understated enough to also ensure that one of the value adds that community-based organisations often bring is the in-kind contribution that you make to programs. And my experience working with lots of different community-based organisations, and in particular in the disability sector, is organisations are notorious for not being able to articulate the significant in-kind contribution that they make. So I think spending some time thinking about that is really important. Another important area, and something DETET are quite focused on, is evidence of you partnering, and demonstrating that you've actually got strong partnerships. So the most important, some of what you've already talked about, you're already indicating you've got links and partnerships in community. One of the important ones that they would want to know about is any partnership that you have with an RTO that's going to be responsible for delivering accredited training for you, if it's core to what you're doing. So DETET also want to see that you have partnerships with other community organisations, both this is both for organisations who may refer people into the SKU project, but also for organisations who might provide support to your participants that you're not providing yourself or you're not able to provide yourself. So other important partnerships are partnerships with local employers, industry members, and opening up opportunities for jobs once the participants complete your program. So it could be small businesses or large employers in your area, but it's important to show that you've got those established relationships with providers. In the revamped SKU, if you like, even though we're only beginning to see that, what we have been told is that there's a greater emphasis on jobs, people ending up in jobs as a positive outcome, but also people retaining those jobs. So the government are wanting to see long-term employment as a result of people participating in the SKU programs. Now, as I've been going around, a number of SKU providers have said that, well, they've already been doing that anyway. So I guess for some people there may not be significant change at the moment. They're still, achieving employment for people or with people, and that's a great focus. But for others, I guess that's been a bit of a challenge. They might have been providing some of the support that leads to some of the preparatory work to become employed, but not so much focused on the outcome of employment. That's definitely a focus now. Yes, I agree that it's difficult to ensure that people are going to retain jobs, and I think DETET survey people 12 months after the program, so it's definitely a challenge, but it is something that they're going to be focused on going forward because they're wanting to see that people are able to retain being employed. So, and then there's, of course, the evaluation. So thinking early about how you're going to measure the success of your project is really important. So some of the essential requirements for SKU applications are including that there's alignment between, we've already talked about this, but alignment between your core business and the funding purpose, established relationships among a community or cohort among the program's target to recruit. So, for example, mature age job seekers or Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people, and some of those people that we spoke about earlier. Having an understanding of what you will need to do if the application is successful, having existing relationships with potential participants, employers and other services to meet the program requirements, and also the relationship with an RTO. So we recommended that people would have a memorandum of understanding that's developed between yourself and an RTO if they're going to be delivering accredited training, and that you have the capacity to provide the relevant supports to reduce barriers to engagement, whether that's, casework or case management, counselling work, communications or relationship and skill building, or a whole range of other skills that people may need. That you have appropriate record keeping systems to provide for required reporting, and the ability to appoint or quickly recruit appropriately skilled and experienced staff to actually deliver the program. So that's just a little bit, I guess, we've just started with a little bit of talking about the preparation side of it when it comes to tender writing, but we're pretty much going to spend the rest of the workshop focused on discussing the assessment criteria. So I'm just reading your comment, Ian. So ongoing employment can be variable. We also ensure the program help define a participant's pathway, something they may not have considered in the past. Yeah, that's good. And some of those strategies and building in those strategies are going to provide DETET with more confidence that you're thinking forward and you are thinking about retention. So yeah, responding to the assessment criteria is the largest part of your writing effort for the tender. They are your opportunity to demonstrate that you understand the requirements, to provide the evidence, to demonstrate your capacity to deliver on the program, and demonstrate value for money, and to articulate your unique value proposition. Responding effectively depends on effective planning, so using that grant on a page and those various headings to make sure you've fleshed out those areas. And responses will be used to score and rank proposals. And as we talked about before, that will be with a central team. It's still with the SKU committees. They're still actually assessing the applications. But again, it's not your local detect staff doing that. As I mentioned before, the tender writing requires a specific discipline. You're not writing a novel. It's different to other forms of writing like creative writing. So the first point we want to make in determining the structure for your response is that you're not writing a novel. It will be very succinct. So the structure is fundamentally different to creative writing. And as the image on the slide indicates, you want to share your key message up front. So tender writing demands the opposite of creative writing. Creative writing, you tend to build to a point and you introduce characters along the way and different elements of a story. Tender writing is not like that at all. There's no room for intrigue or working up to a point. You really need to hit the reader with your key message up front. So by putting examples and evidence down the bottom, though, we don't mean to say it's less important, but rather you need to start with your key message. So when we're structuring our response, we want to decide what the key messages will be first. It's a good idea to do some brainstorming with colleagues for this purpose. So very often you'll see responses that build to a point, but you really do need to put your key message first. That ensures the SKU assessor doesn't have to do any hard work to understand what you're actually trying to say or what your program is endeavouring to actually achieve. So evaluating your project thoroughly will give you a good set of data for future projects and funding. And some of you will already have, of course, some of that evidence. The second resource that we dropped in the chat is the response mapping resource. So it might be useful for you to bring that resource up on your computer, because we're going to use this for the remainder of the workshop as we focus on responding to the assessment criteria. So this is an example of how you might map out your response to assessment criteria 2, for example, which is servicing community and industry needs. And if we look at the assessment criteria, there's a piece in there about need in the community, impact on the community. And if you follow along the top headings here, this is how we've broken it down. The link between what the need is and what you're proposing in your project, and then the local support for your project. So say if I'm applying for funding to run a Get Set for Work project, the need in the community has to be about youth unemployment. So you'll see this on the slide, drops down to your key message. I might mention that young people in my area have a higher unemployment rate than than in other areas. In terms of the impact on community, I might talk about how experiencing unemployment early in life has effects on the social health outcomes of people who are affected by it, and how youth unemployment affects the economic and social wellbeing for the broader community. In terms of linking the project to need, my Get Set for Work project is going to reduce barriers to employment and help youth build connections with local employers. So providing letters of from local employers will demonstrate that local support for your project. You can also bullet point and sub dot point, and start to build your response from there. But using a visual map can be helpful when you need to communicate your thoughts to others. You might also allocate sub-word limits at this stage. So you'll see on the slide that we've put 100 words per point. And you can put those alongside the headings in your draft so that you've got a very good idea of how much you can say and how many examples you can use. It's really easy to kind of start working on one of the assessment criteria or one of the points and continue writing, and before you know it, you've got 500 words there, but actually you've only got 400 words for your entire response. So this will help you remain disciplined. I guess the other thing too is what we'd stress is that you don't need to use all of the examples that you potentially have. You might use, we would recommend you use your strongest examples. So this allows you to remain very succinct. So decide and dot point any evidence and data that you intend to use, and in this way create the scaffold for your answer. This can help you stay on point by having these headings. You know what you need to achieve, and you can stop from time to time to check your word limit and assess whether you're going in the right direction. In terms of evidence, you need to be using evidence to back up what you're saying. So when it comes to research reports, data, statistics, we recommend using data that focuses on your target cohort and your community or region. You could also compare the data and highlight the differences between the community that you're focused on and the broader Queensland community to show your community's needs and how they may be different. It's also important to make sure you're using current data and reference your sources. So some of you may know that QCOS have a hub that is of free information, which you can access. So this includes ABS sources that focus on particular issues like housing and homelessness or youth justice. We also have what we call community profiles for some of the regions, which summarise lots of useful information, and you can access them on the QCOS website. For your information, we also have a webinar coming up on the 17th of September, which is next Wednesday, which focuses on using data in your SKU applications and how you can use that to strengthen your application. So you're welcome to join. It's free. I will just pop that. If you haven't already seen it, I'll pop that one in the chat. This will take you to a link for that webinar and including the registration details. We also have, just on the right side of the slide there, we have a resource on our website, which is using data to strengthen your SKU application and guide, and also using data frequently asked questions. And I will also pop that, a link to that resource in the chat for you. There's a whole range. So QCOS have a dedicated SKU webpage. If you haven't already seen it, there's a whole range of resources available to you. I'm going to pop our website in there. Not just our website, our SKU page in there. There are videos and tools and tips and so on. So please feel free to peruse those. So there's also probably a lot of data that your organisation already has, that your partners have, that's invaluable. So the data you collect running programs, interviews with community members, outcomes of partnerships, and the findings of community consultations you do could be useful resources, useful sources, I should say. The important thing is to focus on the kinds of data that are relevant to what you're suggesting. And if you have project data that shows your effectiveness in similar projects, so if you haven't delivered SKU programs before, but you have delivered similar types of programs, you use your evidence from those programs. Make sure to try to use relatively current or recent evidence and programs, so not things from 10 years ago. That's not as relevant. If you have recent unemployment data for your region, then that's great. But if it's not relevant to your local area or the participant group, or is out of date, then don't use it. So the other thing we can do, if you're looking for a particular data set, or you need some assistance to look for a particular data set, our senior data analyst here and the data team can help with that. So you can reach out to us. Please reach out and I'll put you in contact with them so we can assist you with that. That's and at no cost. So the first step is to be clear on what the criteria are you're responding to and what those assessment criteria are asking for. So we recommend you actually copy and paste the question from the application portal into a Word document and then break it down so that every key point is on its own line, and that way you can ensure that your response addresses each of the points and you don't miss any. So we recommend using clear and direct language, keep it simple font, develop simple statements, because when you can write simple statements, it really does demonstrate that you have a very clear understanding of what you're trying to articulate. And so it will support clarity of thought around the project. One of the things we recommend is imagine you're explaining your program to a family member or a friend who doesn't know anything about SKU. Or doesn't work in the same sector as you, for example, and that they can easily receive that information and understand what your project is actually about. As I indicated before, use the strongest examples of evidence to support each point. So you don't need to use all of the evidence that you have, just choose the strongest examples. Limit acronyms and abbreviations, or ensure that you first use the full term before using acronyms and abbreviations. When referring to long titles or program names, use them once and then put in brackets the project or the appropriate term to use for the rest of the response to limit the numbers of words that you're using. And try not to use words such as perhaps, maybe, try, attempt, or possible, as they can weaken your argument. So moving on to the actual assessment criteria, these are the 5 assessment criteria in brief, which are in the guidelines for supporting your application. And really, while we'll go through each of these and provide tips in relation to responding to them, it's really important that you are looking at the detail in the guidelines, because they tell you everything you actually need to respond to. So the first criteria is capacity to manage. So this is going to be about your organisational viability and experience, and we'll unpack that in a moment. The second is servicing needs. So how is the project going to address the relevant needs? The third is assisting participants, so relevant to the target group or individual participants. The fourth assessment criteria is looking at the outcomes. So that will be about course completion, in people gaining employment and or further education, and then demonstrating cost value for money, or the cost effectiveness and in-kind contributions that your organisation are planning to make. So moving into capacity to manage, this is actually a screenshot from the SKU online application, or the portal for the community work skills application. And note there, up in the top right-hand corner, there's a word limit, a maximum character limit. And it's important to know that that character limit includes spaces and punctuation. So once you are writing, it translates into about 350 to 400 words on a page. So very tight responses they're wanting from you. It is acceptable to use bullet points to save on characters, but it's just to give you an idea of how tight that is. So in terms of the capacity to manage, so you're demonstrating to detect that your organisation has capacity to manage. What's being asked about in this criterion is your financial viability, your reporting, your governance, risk management framework for your organisation, your experience, whether the organisation can deliver what they say or what you say you're going to deliver. So what you need to address as the applicant will be responding to your organisation's track record and staff experience, the relevant experience working with the identified cohort, understanding of the target group's barriers to employment and how you're going to address those. And some of these things perhaps sound very obvious, but we're speaking from experience about what people sometimes do not put in their tenders and need to put in these tender applications. Some of the information you'll have in your grants reference library, so you can see the benefit of pulling all of that information together in one place as you start this process. It includes articulating how you're going to reach and recruit participants and ensure they are eligible for the program. So just in terms of, so as I said, the SKU guide for applying for funding includes a dot-pointed list basically of everything that you need to respond to in that criteria. But I just, you've got your mapping document, hopefully you've got that open. If you just take a minute or so to dot point, a few of the things that you need to actually put in this first assessment criteria, that would be good. But really happy for people to kind of share in the chat or come off mute. This will help give, if you have experience already, and it's useful to share that experience with others in the room, and it'll give people ideas. So happy for anyone to come off mute and to talk about what kind of things that you'd be putting in here to demonstrate that you do have capacity to manage. So you might put in things like, as I said, feel free to pop it in the chat or put your hand up. But you might put in things like how your business or your organisation, what services you already offer in the community that support disadvantaged Queenslanders. You might put in your working relationship with a nominated RTO, for example, and the accommodations that they make and you make in terms of training and supporting people around training. You might put in there how you intend to screen and recruit eligible participants. There's a whole list of things that suggestions that you might put into this area in the grant applications document. Grab the document. I'm not sure if anyone's got it in front of you, but if you flick through to the assessment criteria, they provide both the guidance on in terms of the things that they'd like to see, as well as the types of documentation that you might include in your application. So in terms of the next one, which is servicing the next assessment criteria, which is servicing community and industry need, responses need to address specific requirements. So effective responses here requires the use of community sector knowledge and sector knowledge to demonstrate your understanding of skills and labour needs at the local community level and how the project is going to address these. So as indicated on the slide, the SKU advisory committees are going to be looking for responses that demonstrate local community support, outline how your project is going to link with other local initiatives or other services within the community, and identify the links to local industry stakeholders or employers. So sometimes community organisations may be very strong on the type of support they're going to provide people, but may not, for example, demonstrate enough evidence around the local industry need or the research around local industry need and how your project aims to respond to that need. Remembering it's predominantly a labour force initiative, if you like, while responding to the needs of disadvantaged Queenslanders who are underemployed or unemployed. It's a labour force initiative. So what's being asked about in this assessment criteria is how the project fits into the local community and meets the community's needs, how the organisation's operations and linkages will address community needs, and what you need to address in this criteria are individual work and community labour needs, links to local employers, project links to other initiatives in the community, what you need to address to show, what you need to address here is to show that you know your community. So you know the needs, you know who needs work, and that there is an industry that suits them and fills a labour shortage. You can discuss with your local DTET region, if you don't already know this, what they see as the priority industries are for your local community, and they're happy to discuss that. You don't necessarily have to respond to that. If you can demonstrate evidence that there are other industry needs in your community, that's acceptable too, as long as it's supported by evidence and research. So, or data, if you like. So what are some of the, going back to your mapping document here, your mapping tool, what are some of the things that you would be demonstrating here? What are some of the examples that you might put in here to respond to this assessment criteria? I think we've already talked about letters of support from employers or from industry. I just wonder if a couple of the people that are experienced in SKU might share how you go about obtaining some of those letters from industry or from employers. Sorry, Petra, I see your hand up.
Actually, I was going to answer your first question, but I could probably do a little of both.
Okay.
So great. I went to ID data.
Mm-hmm.
Is it ID? So that's a central database that they collect information from, data from all over. And then you can get a really neat summary about the largest industries in your region or the largest employers in your region, and the breakdown of unemployment and the ratio of all sorts of good things that you can then use for data.
Yep.
And for letters of support, we reach out to those that we do work for, like our clients, but also that we have a lot of relationship with. And it helps when you're a small community like Gympie, because we kind of all know each other.
So are you reaching out, for example, to other community services as potential employers? And what can you remind everybody which SKU program are you delivering?
So work skills, community work skills.
Yeah.
And we run it for 6 months because for Gympie, when we put in for it last year, the unemployment was really low. It was still at 8%, but for Gympie, that was really low, which meant that those who were left in the unemployment pool had significant barriers. And that's why we partnered with Job Match Disability Employment, so they could provide the wraparound support, and we were the host workplace. And being a host workplace, conservation ecosystem management's our gig anyway. And we have a lot of that. We have a lot of agriculture, we have a lot of HQP, we have a lot of parks and wildlife, we have a lot of that industry that could use skilled labour. So it kind of worked for us in this region. Yeah,
it sounds like it. Anyone from, say, more central based or Brisbane, and what your strategies are? Nope, not at the moment. That's okay. People in workshops have talked about, as I indicated earlier, sometimes ensuring that the numbers of letters from employers or industry and the number of positions that you're seeking are significantly more than the number of participants that you would be supporting, to demonstrate to DTET that actually there's a plethora of opportunities here in this industry for people. So that's certainly been a tip, from people. Just on that, your letters of support from industry need to be generally no more than 3 months old. So if you are planning if you're seeking these, ensure that they're dated, well within range once you submit your application. One of the other tips, I guess, from people just on those employer letters is some providers have suggested they produce various template letters, and that's not it's not for a cookie cutter approach, but it's more to help the employers understand what they need to be writing in these letters of support, because otherwise there are big delays in getting these letters of support back for a lot of providers. So thinking about those things. Oh. Okay. So in terms of strategies to assist participants, the SKU initiative really targets those who have had sometimes significant barriers to employment. So there's many reasons that people will struggle to find work, and this criteria will show that you understand the barriers specific to the group. I'm going to give you a heads up that I'm going to ask the group again to share some of this in a moment when I finish. So just be thinking about that. That you understand the group that you're targeting and that you have plans for how you will support your participants. So what is being asked in this assessment criteria is how you as a community organisation will address the participants' challenges, especially barriers to gaining and maintaining employment. So you'll need to address barriers in the community, the cohort's learning needs and appropriate goals, job placement and post-placement support. So training delivery strategies need to be flexible and adequate to meet the needs of the target participants. And appropriate time needs to be allowed for learners with a disadvantage to complete the qualification. So taking into consideration the target group and level of qualification being delivered. Training and support plans must be clear, make clear what the community-based organisation will be providing in addition to the training that the partner RTO will be providing. That's for programs where there is accredited training. And so considerations might include things like cultural safety. As I mentioned earlier in an example, the days or the times of the day that you provide for participation, accessibility and transport. Thank you so much, Petra, and thanks for participating and sharing. Petra's just made a note she needs to leave. So accessibility and transport, language and learning resources, resume support, interview training, psychosocial needs people may have, are some of the things that you can think about. For people, again, for providers in the room who have delivered, can you share some of the things, some of the strategies that you've utilised to support your participants? And or if people haven't delivered SKU and you're in the room and you know the kind of target group of people that you would be thinking about doing an application around, can you share some of the strategies you think that you would use to support them to be successful in both training and in gaining employment? And again, pop your hand up or happy to come off mute and talk, or pop it in the chat. Anyone? Sorry if I'm missing, if anyone's got their hand up and I'm missing them, I'm very sorry. We might have a very quiet group here. Oh, Beck, thank you.
Well, look, I guess as a newbie, I'll probably have a bit more of a question of what this would look like. So in terms of identifying like the needs and barriers, we will be having like an intake form for our participants that come on there that specifically asks to help identify any things like that. And then we have a partnership with our local community services groups like Rosebery and Headspace to be able to link in with them if there's any additional supports that are required, and how, you know, we can help support those sorts
Yep.
of things. So I'm just wondering, is that kind of like a bit of an alignment in that, or
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
one example
So,
of a demonstration?
yeah. So do you deliver services, for example, as your organisation, do you deliver services and have a specialisation or expertise with a particular target group of people that you're thinking about for the program?
Yeah, so for our program there, they are students that are at risk of leaving school. They've been identified with a point of contact at the school. And like you said, the aim is to bring them and give them some training and education in industry. So obtain their white card course, provide some work experience in there, but also try and redirect back into that education and you know, try and identify those things they are struggling with staying at school, and whether we can try and identify that and strengthen some supports for them to be able to re-engage and stay in education. But if they choose not to, okay, how can we help support you in coming out that way?
Okay, so thinking through the types of barriers that they may face to gaining employment, for example, or completing a qualification of some sort, what would the obvious things be? What do you identify as the obvious things?
So we're looking in there at if there's any learning disabilities.
Yep.
And how we can support that, and then reaching out within our partners with CQ University and TAFE and Headspace to see how we can bolster that and provide them with external supports.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is a good idea. I mean, that's a good example of how you're demonstrating to DETET that you are looking at very specific barriers that relate to the people that, you know, your target group, and the either partnerships in community, including, you know, education institutions, but also mental health services, to assist individuals, because you might not provide all of those services yourself, which is fine, but you've got the linkages in community to be able to do that. So that's definitely an example. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So the only challenge just there is the SKU is typically for people who have already exited school.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
yeah, we are aware of that, and we've had a look. We've had a look at the guidelines around that and what would be required. I think with the referrals from them from there, but it is also open to those that have left.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Does anyone else have any comments there, or do you want to add anything to just using Bex as an example? I'm not sure if we've got people left here that deliver SKU or not in the room. Okay, we'll move on, but thank you. Again, look at if we go to the guidelines, please look at the guidelines for applying and look under the assessment criteria, and it will give a range of examples of the kind of things that DETET are wanting to see there. And we'll just jump into a short clip. Hopefully this works. And this is about providing just an example of supports and strategies from a program based in Brisbane. I just wanted to mention there that he mentioned Suited for Success, that delivers the free service in terms of suiting people up in interview clothes and so on. That's no longer a free service. It's about $200 per participant, which is still really good value. And the people that are using that service, they can build that cost into their SKU application. So that's a legitimate cost to request. So moving on to the assessment criteria 4 and outcomes. So what is being asked for in this criteria? So this assessment criteria really comes down to the key objective of the program, which is how you are going to help your participants to get a job. So again, this is about showing that you know the local community in which you'll be delivering the project, that you know how to address the qualification and skills. That you're providing a match, the needs of local employers, and how you're going to support disadvantaged learners to overcome their barriers to employment. So this is where you need to provide evidence that local employers know your organisation and support your project, and if possible, would employ your participants. So make sure that the letters of support from employers are current and relevant to your project. Put in any examples of past performance and outcomes achieved either for SKU or other comparable projects, as we discussed earlier. So you can see here why it's so important to properly evaluate any of the work you do. It is all part of the evidence for future funding for a range of grants, but including SKU. So the outcomes will vary for the specific programs that you're applying for. DTET's expectations about the outcomes to be achieved for each of the programs are published on their website and in the program guidelines. So each of the 6 program areas have their own specific guidelines. So it is worth grabbing that off their website and looking at that as well. So again, this is where it pays to have done your homework up front. Make sure you've read the guidelines, and if you have the checklist, you can refer back to check that you're addressing the expected outcomes of the specific program that you're applying for or programs. If you don't know, providers can apply for up to 10 different SKU applications at a time. So, and there are providers running multiple SKU programs. So what are funders looking for? Again, this is a quote from a SKU advisory committee member. Applicants need to show their connections to the community, to local employers, and explain how they will move people to employment. Again, emphasising the renewed focus on employment as an outcome, as a positive outcome. So just jumping back to this, we've talked a bit about this throughout today, but again, can people think about, again, whether or not you're a SKU provider yet, or you're thinking about becoming one, what sorts of things do you think would be important for you to provide evidence for in this area for outcomes? Thank you, Noble. If we jump to the SKU guidelines for applying, it might be that the guidance they give here, for example, is describe how the proposal qualifications and or job preparation training will help participants to gain employment. They'll want you to outline negotiated goals and project activities to enable participants to achieve identified outcomes. So they're really telling you, point by point exactly what they're wanting you to demonstrate. So again, I take you back to the guidelines there. Okay, let's move on. So the last one is cost value for money. So that's the final assessment criteria. And cost and value for money is not just about the price that you're setting. So DTET does have some nominal benchmarks for cost, but the best value doesn't mean the cheapest. You do, however, have to address how you came up with your costs. So you need to justify how these costs will help participants overcome any barriers and actually get a job. Budgeting and financial management are covered in a webinar that we'll be offering this Friday, in fact. So I will, which is specific to SKU. So I'll just pop that for you. That's free. If you're interested in attending that webinar, here's the information. You'll also get all of these links in the post-event email that goes out in the next couple of days. So it's important to outline how much in-kind contribution is included and what this entails. Remember to think about what your organisation is providing and express any kind of in-kind support in your application. Examples of this include, for example, that you might be offering a training room or learning resources or catering or transport or other forms of support. Put in the rationale about how you came to your cost estimates. So TTEP want to see very clear rationales for how you are coming to your cost estimates, and be realistic when you're setting your budget. So you want to be competitive, but you also need to ensure that you've actually thought through all of the costs in delivering your project. So if your costs are on the higher side of the benchmarking, for example, costs, then just make sure you're explaining and providing a rationale as to why they are higher than the benchmark. And it could be, for example, if you're delivering in a remote area, you might have higher transport costs involved. As long as they are seeing the rationale, that's acceptable. I'm just going to play a very short video here on budgeting. So again, some quite basic budgeting tips there, but really important, and these are lessons learned. So some of the resources that QCOS have produced and put on the SKU webpage on our website have come from feedback from the department's assessing team around how they want to see applications strengthened. So, as I said, we've got a budgeting webinar this Friday dedicated to SKU applications. So please feel free to come along or send somebody along. And yeah, the other thing too, in the guidelines, they actually have a budget proposal tip. So they tell you exactly what you can actually include and the things that you can't include in your SKU application, the budget for your SKU application. So that pretty much brings us to the end of our workshop today. Thank you to the last 4 people online. I think that probably does it. So I might end the session now, and thank you again for participating today.